There's an ongoing heroin epidemic right now. Some people point to the overprescription of pain medications as the cause, others to the hopelessness of the job market out there. In this video, I'm going to argue that it's actually the deregulation of the sexual market which has led to the present crisis. Now, it was speaking with John Steele last night that helped me sort all of this out. And I am going to be oversimplifying to a certain degree. Some time back, I wrote an article, this was 3 years ago, about how immigration leads to mating disruption in the sexual marketplace. And that's a part of it. But I think it's largely the deregulation. And this really stood out to me recently when I was at the bar talking to a couple of girls. I've mentioned this story before on other podcasts, but the short version is that I was talking to these two women who are finely dressed, paying for their own drinks, and I could have sworn they were absolutely disgusted by me, not interested in me. I was getting no positive body language from them, and yet they sat there talking with me for several hours. I probably could have gotten their phone numbers, but all they wanted to talk about was celebrities, pop culture, absolute nothing. And these were not stupid, trashy women. Okay, these should have been good quality women, but they're just completely nonplussed by having any sort of real conversation, as if their serotonin banks had been completely overloaded. So before we dive into this, let's talk about what a deregulated marketplace is. Because I know here on the right we have a lot of market purists and anarcho-capitalists. So I'd like to address the question of why a deregulated market can be a very, very bad thing. The first reason is because it doesn't take into account a mature marketplace. Now, what's a mature marketplace? Think of Las Vegas. If I said to you, I want you to set up a gambling town with entertainment and great-looking streets and make it a tourist destination of the world, what odds would you put on the craps table? How much would you spend on your entertainment venues? What sort of food, what tiers of fast food, nice food, and then fancy food, what tiers, what percentages would you have of all of that? And you wouldn't be able to answer that question, because without all the information that Las Vegas has gained over the years through trial and error, you wouldn't know how to set it up properly. Markets require maturation. They need trial and error, and as they mature, you get regulations controlling how they mature. See, this is, it's Chesterton's fence. Chesterton once said, "Don't ever take a fence down until you know the reason why it was put up." Now, the anarcho-capitalist argument goes that there are all of these fences that have been built by government bureaucrats that do nothing but limit trade and limit the individual. So what we should do is tear down all the fences, revert everything to the private market, and allow organic institutions to grow up, which then become mature markets. And that's a very interesting idea. I would love to see that experimented with on Mars or something like that. But when we talk about deregulation in the present world, the market purist will say that if we deregulate this, it will be far more efficient. We will get so much more out of it without all these barriers to trade. But they're not talking about a full reset, where we tear down all the fences and then allow new fences to grow organically. It's always one particular section of fencing. We tear down that one fence without considering why it was built in the first place, and now the cattle can run everywhere, leading, at times, to a tragedy of the commons. Because there are times and places that regulation is a very good thing. Not just the regulation that develops in an organic sense in a mature market like Las Vegas, but regulation for two other reasons. Number one is vital services, and number two is potential extreme negative externalities. Now, in the past, vital services. Examples of this in the United States and America and the colonial countries, examples of this would be mail delivery and state broadcasting. Now, these days, with the spread of internet service, with the spread of just-in-time delivery, UPS, Amazon, it's not so obvious why these were great things. However, if you go back to the 1850s, if you go back to the 1930s, the 1940s, 50s, that mail delivery service connected the entire country. It kept the country as a unified whole. Same thing with state broadcasting, the CBC, both television and radio. It's not a vital service to get the latest episode of Friends if you live in the far Yukon or the deep outback. It is a vital service with the entire structure of government that you be informed of the news, that you know what's going on in your country and in the world at large. And so these vital services were subsidized and protected by regulations to maintain those vital lifelines of communication throughout the nation. The other type of regulated market is the uncontrollable negative externality, and this would be nuclear power. Nuclear power is a wonderful thing. It's one of the cleanest forms of energy out there, and it provides a whole bunch of white-collar jobs. I'm a big fan of nuclear power. It's also potentially extremely dangerous. You know, the Fukushima event is still having fallout. We still don't know the full story of the amount of damage caused by that, and it's quite frightening. Overwatch of things like nuclear power are extremely vital. And so when you effect deregulation, not just, sometimes the regulated market, sometimes there's a problem with it. It's been around too long, it's getting old, and it needs to be fixed. You need a strong leader to come in and say, no, we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to update it for modern times. That's not what deregulation is. Deregulation is when you strip everything that's been holding them back without thinking about some of the other reasons that fence might have been there. And so what happens is you get an initial boom. There's all those patches that were holding people back, that were stringing people up with red tape. That's all gone, so people can finally go and do the business that they want to do. But after that, you start to get the tragedy of the commons. That one line of fence was preventing these two cattle owners from trading. But it was also protecting this field that was being laid fallow. And so, yes, you get rid of the fence, the two cattle owners can now trade cattle, but those cattle can also run roughshod over that grass and destroy, the grass needed for next year. Simplified example of it, but yes, the push for deregulation without a complete deregulation, right, because we still have all these other controls, it's just this one little narrow area that's being deregulated, sows chaos. And this is what we have seen with the sexual marketplace. Now, back in the 1950s, monogamy was a mature market. Okay, it assessed the characters of men and women and put them into a situation where they both benefited one another. And when it was initially deregulated, you know what? There was a benefit to that. Yeah, there were probably some marriages that they were forced together, they felt obligated to get together, they didn't like each other, and they didn't do a very good job raising their children because they were both miserable. For sake of argument, let's accept that. But again, this is like the development of the socialist state. Okay, when you initially implement a socialist state, in Sweden, and the Swedish population is used to hard work, is used to paying their taxes on time, and you introduce a socialist system, they say, oh, nice, I am now definitely taken care of if I need it, but I'll keep working. 3 generations later, you start to see the consequences of that, where people no longer have this work ethic. So when monogamy was overturned, people still remained monogamous. It was the basic assumption of how you were supposed to live your life. And people just became a bit more willing to abandon a partner that was cruel or sadistic or what have you. Again, we're taking the most positive view of all of this. And, guys like John Steele and myself, growing up in the early aughts and 90s, we probably lived through the peak. Freedom to do whatever we wanted. Men and women could do whatever we wanted, but there was still an assumption of monogamy, of romance. There was still shame attached to things like pornography or prostitution. So back when he and I were young studs, you used to go to the bar, you'd meet a girl, maybe you met her in class, you met her wherever, you'd have a conversation with her, you'd get to know each other, you'd dance with her, and then things would progress from there. And maybe you stay with each other, maybe you don't. But there was still that fun to it all. Now, of course, at the same time this is going on, the negative externalities are building up. To enable this market, first of all, there's the whole introduction, the normalization of birth control. Birth control pills that are messing with women's instincts, condoms that only protect against easily curable STDs. Abortion becomes more and more in demand, more and more normalized, and just the general hurt feelings that happen following sex. Sex is a very psychologically intense experience. And we don't notice that initially. It's not like alcohol, where you get a hangover the next day and you know that the alcohol caused the hangover. With sex, the intensity takes a little bit longer. The broken heart hardens over time. The woman feels like she was used. She feels dirty. A woman has an abortion and she starts treating her womb like a graveyard. All of this stuff builds up over time. And the more sex that you have, the more casually you treat it. So as I said, when Steele and I were, going to bars when we were young bucks, there was still that assumption of romance, and you didn't just have a one-night stand. You stayed together with the person for a while afterwards. These days, the market is rushing to the lowest common denominator. It's a race to the bottom. And sex, it's not like coffee pots, If the coffee maker industry has a race to the bottom, well, so what? You have to buy a new coffee pot every 6 months, but it only costs you $15. So what? When sex is a race to the bottom, you wind up with a broken civilization. And that's where we are right now. Things have devolved to the point where porn and social media are now considered acceptable. Now, what do I mean by that second one? Social media is now acceptable. Well, let me get to that quickly. 10 years ago, porn was still shameful. It was embarrassing. It was not ubiquitous. You had to go buy a magazine, or you had to go rent a video. At best on your dial-up modem, you could get a few pictures. And everybody was still embarrassed about it. You were supposed to be talking to girls, having an actual conversation. Only perverts would go to prostitutes or look at porn. These days, porn has become so normalized that it's everywhere. And it damages your ability to enjoy sex in the real world. Okay, this has been covered at length. I don't think I need to go into any more of this, and people are using it shamelessly. And so when you meet a woman, you're not looking at her as a person. You're looking at her as a sexual thrill. And so she needs to do more and more and more to achieve the same level of extremeness that you get in the pornography. Now, social media social media is the same thing for women. You know, to vastly oversimplify the relations between the sexes, women use sex to get attention, while men use attention to get sex. So when a woman goes on social media, when she flirts shamelessly on social media, and that's the key word, shamelessly, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know, go talk to a woman in her 50s. You know, go check out her social media account. If she's a decent person, she would not engage in that sort of behavior, that sort of shameless attention whoring. But again, we have so mercantilized sex, so raced it down to the bottom, so degenerated it, that your average woman nowadays thinks absolutely nothing about getting a bunch of beta orbiters online and posting sexy pics all over the place and getting that attention, and immersing herself in Hollywood culture, in romance novels, in the female version of attention porn. And so now you have the two sexes, you know, men with their completely overloaded on video games and pornography, who are no longer able to find a woman that attractive. You know, she is no longer giving him that incredible, intense serotonin release that a man from even 10 years ago would have got from a woman. And the women are so overloaded on all the attention, even though it's a cheap, low-quality form of attention. You know, it only takes 30 seconds to send a message on Plenty of Fish. But, you know, that's okay. She got 500. She feels really popular. You know, she's so overloaded on that just the attention of a man saying, hey, those are really nice boots, that doesn't even register. It does absolutely nothing for her. You know, as the Beckloff says, this just gets me to normal. You know, the average attention of a man is not enough. And so, romance, mating, this thing that used to be the driving force of our life is no longer adequate. And so we turn to heroin. Again, it's introduced into the population through overprescription of pain meds. But it stays in the population because what else is there? What else is there? We are so overloaded on this stuff that when we look out there, well, we have hopelessness. We all feel it, don't we? You know, go and try and find a wife these days. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. You know, and women, it is just as difficult for them. And at home, we are getting this high-intensity dosage of attention and pornography. And out there in public, we can't get anything at all. You know, the Common Filth, in his recent episode, was discussing meth addiction in the homosexual scene, and how meth does a similar thing to heroin. Meth, as I recall, it gives you 8 times as much serotonin in your system. And so these homosexuals are developing to the point where they're incapable of having sex without meth. And with straights, they're incapable of feeling joy without heroin. And thus we're becoming this drugged-out zombie nation. And if you haven't seen these people, because it's never just heroin either. Okay, they're doing heroin, alcohol, marijuana, stimulants like nicotine and coffee. These people are so strung out and unpredictable and just zoned out from life because they are feeling hopeless. Now, I'm going to finish off by mentioning some of the other factors that are part of it as well. But they all do tend to lean back towards the sexual marketplace. The first is that mating disruption I mentioned earlier. Now, when I was writing that article back in 2014, I was just talking about how different groups, I was talking about some Eastern Europeans, okay, who are far more sexually aggressive than a Western man would be. And so this communication disruption, made it more difficult for people to bond and form successful relationships. Because when the Eastern European guy is being more sexually aggressive, he might not actually be looking for a relationship, but it confuses the woman. It's just different lingos, different ways of moving. These days, we have violent third world savages. I was just reading another article about, New Year's Day, they're setting off fireworks into crowds. This is like the industrial equipment running over top of the sewer pipe where the burrowing owl is trying to raise a nest. All right, it's not just a different breed of burrowing owls making things confusing. It's industrial equipment making it so loud that they flee and they abandon their eggs. Where are you supposed to go to meet a woman now when you have violent jihadis blowing things up? When people are getting more nervous, there's more stranger danger, etc. Another factor is the economic disruption. Okay, the economy is doing absolutely terrible, and we have both sexes. The default assumption is that they're working. So there's less free time, less time to organize your stuff. You don't have somebody helping you out, taking care at home. Kids are not allowed to stay with their parents anymore, so they move out as soon as they have any money and blow it all on rent. So yeah, the economic difficulties that we have right now are affecting it. The disruption in the sexual roles that we have. Okay, women are taught to act like men, and men are taught to act like women, and for some reason this makes the two sexes much less attractive to one another. But like I said, a lot of it just goes back to sex, because that's really one of our biggest motivations out there, to find a mate, to build a home, and to raise some children. It starts with the selfishness of eros, and it grows into the selflessness of caritas and agape. And love is being blocked because sex has degenerated into nothing but a bodily function that we take care of privately, and we have become so numbed to it that heroin becomes our only choice. Take care of yourselves, folks. Avoid the superstimulants. Live in reality. Deus Vult. Aurini out.